Welcome to JLive. I'm Laura Mandel, JArts Executive Director, and it's great to be with you for JLive, our JArts virtual series of bite-sized conversations about Jewish life and art with the best artists with Boston connections. Today, I'm with artist Rachel Hammerman for a special Purim edition of JLive. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
So we are, of course, in costume to be appropriate and on theme. I should note before we get into this, this is the second JLive Rachel is doing with us. Our first was one of the early days of JLive mid-pandemic, and she showed us these incredible Mezuzot that she makes out of polymer clay. And fast forward, we were so inspired by her work that we asked her to create a special piece for Purim to help us all understand and celebrate Purim in new ways, because it's such a beautiful and rich and deep holiday. So today we're going to explore this panel project that Rachel's created. So Rachel, take it away.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Laura, and thank you, JArts, for this incredible opportunity. First of all, to live in Shushan for the past 10 months, which the weather is probably better there than it is here at 4 degrees in Boston. And also for giving me this platform to share my work and my thoughts and my costume that I'm now going to take off. So let's jump in because it's a lot in a little bit of time. First, we'll talk stylistically. The story of Purim, Megillat Esther, is kind of like a fairy tale with a lot of Shakespearean subplots. It reads like with palace intrigue, king and a queen, an orphan child, a beauty pageant, which is not so beautiful, assassination attempts, near genocide, hidden identities. It's a really dynamic fairy tale-like story, which is also really dark. So, and it's also marketed as a kid's holiday, even though actually the story is not very kid-friendly. So I'm trying to balance the idea of this dynamic fairy tale with the lightness and the levity. The holiday is you're supposed to be, that's what the song was on the intro, happy during this holiday. So balancing the heaviness of the story, of the content, with the lightness and the joy that you're supposed to gather from this story. So stylistically, I made the colors very bright. I treated there's 12 panels. I treated each panel like a page in a children's book. So yes. So
but I just love, Rachel, that when you first sent an image, my first reaction was, I hope it's okay to say this, it looks in the best way possible like a Dr. Seuss book. And you immediately said to me, you get it. And I saw immediately before you even explained it, that mix of the whimsical and the dark. So, okay, keep telling us.
And people who know me know that Dr. Seuss is incredibly important to my way of seeing. So yes, and yes, Laura, for picking it up. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into the story. So the story primarily in the beginning is, and the whole story is, it's a power grab. It's a power struggle. There's a lot of egos. And so we'll start with the first panel. And the first character we're introduced to is Ahasuerus, who's the king. The story begins, he's having a party for 180 days, and then he tacks on another 7 because 180 wasn't enough. He had a lot to show off, including at the end, his wife, his then wife, his first wife, which was Vashti. And he wants her to dance naked, why not, in front of all of the guests. And how dare she? She said no. So he's humiliated. But what does he do? We find out right away that he's really insecure. He doesn't know what to do. So he asks his advisors. So his advisors, they want to pump up his ego. And they say, don't worry, we're going to make an example. Let's make an example. You can go to the next slide. We're going to make an example of Vashti. We'll send her away. Because what if all of the other women in the empire see what Vashti did? Now they're not going to listen to their husbands. So Vashti isn't just Vashti. She's all women. So we can't have all the women acting loose and not listening to their husbands. So let's send her away. Okay. So that's Ahasuerus. Egotistical, but insecure. Now we're going to jump to the 5th panel. We're going to be introduced to the other egomaniac in this story, which is Haman. Now, Haman is the viceroy, and he is marching through the streets, and he's worked out with Ahasuerus that when he marches through the streets, everybody needs to bow, kind of like what I command when I walk down the street. And so he's got a huge ego. It's kind of like a taut balloon, so inflated that a mere needle prick, which is in this case Mordecai, will deflate him. So he's going down the street, everybody's bowing except one guy, Mordecai. Now, I didn't realize actually until this project that he didn't notice Mordecai. It's the crowd that noticed Mordecai. And they come to him just like people who are, it's like cuddling up to a bully. They tell the bully, they tell Haman, hey, there's this guy, Mordecai, this Nebuchadnezzar Jew, and he's not bowing down to you. What are you going to do about it? And so unlike Ahasuerus, who is insecure and needs advice and makes an example out of Vashti, he says, I'm not going to make an example out of Mordecai. Let's just get rid of all the Jews. Even though actually Mordecai was standing up on his own. He wasn't standing up as a Jew. It's not like he said, I am Jew. I'm not bowing. There are other people in the crowd, probably other Jews who were bowing. So he makes this famous plea, which sounds scarily familiar today, to the king. And he says, there's these foreign people and they live among us and they do things differently. They have different gods. They have different rules. It doesn't behoove the king to keep them around. Let's get rid of them. So the king rubber stamps the request, and there's an edict to kill all the Jews. Now let's move back. We're going to go back to this panel and this panel. So we've got king, viceroy, and now let's talk about Mordecai. Mordecai, I'm going to argue, it's not my own argument. There's plenty of scholars that say this, although it's not the popular one we learn, that Mordecai had a transformation. In the first half of the story, which is the first 6 panels, I'd argue that he also was hungry for power. After all, why didn't he bow? He almost set off a whole genocide because of his refusal to bow for 2 seconds. Why was that so hard for him to do? We're told when we're kids, he didn't bow because Jews don't bow to other people. That's actually not true. Jews can bow to other people. We're not allowed to bow to other gods. And if it was for pikuach nefesh, which is to save other lives, for sure, he could have bowed so that there wouldn't be a genocide. But say he was even that religious, and he didn't, and because Haman was so egotistical, he was kind of like a god, so he didn't want to bow to him. Well, if he was that religious, why did he allow his cousin, Esther, to go and enter the palace in the beauty pageant? So we're going to backtrack for 2 seconds. When Vashti was gone, all of a sudden, the Ahasuerus was alone, and we couldn't have that. So he has a beauty pageant, which was not beautiful, where he has all the virgins of the land come and basically, for a year, they undergo these baths and treatment. At the end of the year, they have a one-night stand with the king. If the king likes their performance, they become queen. If he doesn't, they're no longer virgins. So now they need to be stuck as concubines for their whole lives in the king's harem. Some luck. So if he was so religious, Mordecai, how would he allow his cousin to undergo this totally immodest, horrible life? That's certainly not religious behavior. The story really should have been, if Mordecai was so religious, as soon as that edict came out to gather all the virgins, this should have been a story of Mordecai and Esther running away from Shushan. That's what the Purim story should be, but it wasn't. On top of that, when we're introduced to Hadassah, when we're introduced to Esther, we're told Esther, which is her Jewish name, goes by, Hadassah goes by Esther. Esther is a Persian name. It's from the Persian god Ishtar, which is the god of the stars. Anyway, Mordecai tells her, hide your identity, tuck that Jewish star in your shirt. Don't tell anybody where you're from. So I would argue in the first half of this story, Mordecai and Esther are trying to be passing Persians. They are not trying to be Jewish. They are, they don't deny it, but they're not open about it. Until Haman calls out Mordecai. And he calls him out not when he's acting as a Jew. He just knows he's Jewish, and they're all gone. They all have a death sentence because of his actions. So all of a sudden he has a, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus moment, and he realizes, hey, I'm an endangered minority. So now we can skip to panel 7. Okay, there's Mordecai. He tears his clothes. He's in sackcloth and he runs to the queen. He's in sackcloth, one, that's garb of mourning. I'd argue he's in mourning, first of all, because his people are going to get killed. And second of all, because part of him, his dream died. He thought he could be, he's always, the whole story, he's always sitting outside the palace gates. He's trying to get in. He's trying to be a powerful Persian. And he realizes now, I'm not what I thought I could be. I have a big J on my forehead for Jew. So he goes to the other powerful Jew he knows who maybe can help. That's Esther. He says to Esther, this is like straight out of World War II, except for it happened before. He says, don't think, Esther, just because you're in the palace, you're the most passing of passing Persians. Don't think that you're safe here. You're like the Jew in World War II with just one Jewish grandparent. You're going to the concentration camps along with everybody else. She hears her cousin and she's like embarrassed. She's like, no way. Because she's been very much passing. She sends him new clothes. He says, no, Esther. This is his moment where he makes the statement that every successful minority people who make it, they have to realize they can't rely on the numbers of the crowd, but they have to find an inner strength and an inner purpose. You can go to the next slide. Okay, and he says, who knows, maybe it's for a time like this that you were made the queen. What does that mean? It means all of this chaos that you've been living in. You were orphaned. You came to live with me. Then you had to endure this horrendous year-long process and basically get raped by the king. And then you have to spend your days living with that guy. Maybe there was actually a big reason why you had to endure this basically awful life. She hears that and she gets it. That's the moment that she gets it. But unlike Mordecai, Mordecai says, just go and beg. Like he's desperate. Just go and beg. And she's like, wait a minute. You have to think. She doesn't say it, but this is her actions. You have to think. That's not going to work. Like, you have to look at the characters we're talking about. These are like egomaniacs. They don't care, like, clearly they don't care about the Jews. If just because I ask, he's not going to say yes. I have to appeal to them. I have to be a diplomat. I have to think. Esther's the hero of this story because she takes a breath. In the midst of this crisis, she looks around and she says, okay, I have to think with my brain. If I'm just brave to say, this is hateful, but bravery without your brain is just oftentimes, unfortunately, noise. But bravery with brain has a chance of making progress. So she is the hero because she uses her brain. So basically I don't have time to get into all the details of the story, but I didn't write, you can look it up. She pits her husband's insecurity and jealousy against Haman's huge taut balloon ego. You can go to slides, you can flip through slides. What is this? 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's Haman. he's furious. He says, like, even with all of this, I have 10 strong sons. I have all the wealth. I have all the stature. That's the strong arm, whatever. I'm not happy every time I see Mordechai, that Jew. So she pits these two personality disorders, for lack of a better term, against one another. Sure enough, she's successful. She entraps Haman in this, and so he gets killed, and the Jews get saved. Yay! We go to the left. So yes, this is her entrapping him. And so then we can go to the next slide. The Jews get saved. And the last chapter, Esther writes, and every year from generation to generation, we have to celebrate the holiday of Purim, and we should be happy. You should have light and joy and honor and be happy, and we'll celebrate Purim. Now, that's very strange. That's a very strange thing to say, be happy. Basically, they almost all just got murdered, and you're telling that everybody, okay, be happy. That's like if you're really stressed out and somebody says, relax. Like, that's not really gonna work. But maybe there's some wisdom here. So let's pan out to the wisdom of Purim and Esther. The holiday is named Purim. The word Purim is pur, which is a lot, which is the ancient, like basically like dice that Haman used in order to pick the date upon which to start his rampage against the Jews. So it's part of the chaos and order, randomness. Like he just threw a dice, it landed on that date, let's kill the Jews. The holiday is called basically randomness, chaos, which is really the world we live in. It's chaos. But what do we do on that day of chaos? Is we read Megillat Esther. We read not Megillah, not the story of Ahasuerus, not the story of Haman, not the story of Mordechai, of Esther. Why? Because Esther is the character who took a deep breath in the face of this randomness. She saw, okay, we're in a bad way. I'm not just going to act desperately. I'm not just going to go big. I'm not just going to make noise. I'm going to think thoroughly. How can I be successful? How can I find light? How can I find happiness? And actually, her character is kind of tragic. It's really sad. Like, she remains queen at the end of this. She's stuck living with this awful king. She's stuck in foreigner in a foreign land. What's so great about that? She has nothing to gain, but she does, because she calls upon that inner strength that Mordechai teased out of her. Maybe if you can find purpose within the chaos, if you can make order from the randomness, maybe actually, and she does, save her people. This world is dark. Let's be honest. Like, we're in the midst of war. We can legitimately spend every day of our lives in mourning and be legitimate about that, because the world is tough and hard and sad. But the wisdom of Purim and the wisdom of Esther is, I'm not going to win everything, but you do have to sometimes say, be happy. And be happy doesn't mean I'm going to win it all. It means I'm going to find those moments of light. I'm going to bring that lightness out of the darkness and accept that it's not everything, but it's something. Be happy. So that's basically the Megillah. One more thing to add to make it even more relatable is that the story of Esther, the Megillah itself, does not mention God directly. That doesn't mean that God is not in the story. You can certainly see God in the story if that's your reading. But unlike every other biblical story, God does not come down as a character to talk to the hero. Esther doesn't turn to God for advice. God doesn't enter her dreams. There's no 10 plagues. There's no major revelation. This is all Esther taking a deep breath in that moment of approaching this situation and resolving it from man to man. That's very modern. That's the life that we're living now. I mean, maybe God talks to you, but so far God doesn't talk to me, not directly. So, and the other thing is that this story is extremely relevant because this is one of the only stories that is completely in the diaspora. It begins in Shushan, it stays in Shushan, it ends in Shushan. She's stuck in this palace. All the characters are stuck in Shushan. We are where we are. You know, she's going to stay in Shushan. Other biblical stories there, either moving towards Eretz Israel or toward land of Israel or Canaan, or even other biblical stories, they're leaving the Garden of Eden. They're in the Noah's story, there's a flood and they leave. The Tower of Babel's destroyed and everybody gets dispersed. Here we're in one place. So maybe the story of Purim and the message of Purim is the most relevant story. You are where you are. The world around you is dark. But if you find that light, if you tease it out of the darkness, if you say to yourself, sometimes you just need to be happy. And being happy isn't a blind happiness. It's just bringing a little bit of light to the darkness.
Rachel, that was the most brilliant explanation of the Purim story that I've had the pleasure of hearing in my entire life. Thank you. Your work is absolutely beautiful, and you could not have ended on a more perfect note because it is about bringing the light. And I think your work and what we're doing at JArts with bringing arts, you know, even in the darkest of times when it feels really hard and almost pointless, you have shown us why it matters. So I just want to say thank you because this is really fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I hope for everyone out there that you know that all of these panels are featured right now on the JArts Society 6 shop online. I've put the link into the chat. I encourage you all to go shopping a little bit. This project actually started when Rachel and our team and I had a conversation about mishloach manot, the traditional baskets you give to the poor on Purim and what the intent of those was. And we said, we really want to think about a new way to tell the story. So Rachel, you've done that. I hope you will all go on to Society 6 and buy your versions of this work because I think the detail is just incredible. And I have to say one thing, which is simply, we are over time, but someone just asked the question that I was about to ask you, which is perfect, which is, you are a genius of making clay almost look like paint. Give us the 1-minute overview of your technique and how you do what you do.
The technique is patience. And music or podcast in the background, but it's Sculpey polymer clay, and just tease it out. You can always, if anybody has more specific questions, I don't want to take up everybody's time, but please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, there are tons and tons of compliments in the chat that I won't read, but I'll just tell you tons of compliments. And for anyone who knows me, you know that I think Rachel's #1 fan, and I'm ordering Mezuzot constantly. So I encourage you all to order Mezuzot for birthdays, bar mitzvahs, you name it, but also go and check out the panels online. Rachel, this has been a real treat. Thank you for giving me a whole new look at Purim. I really appreciate it. For all of you out there, if you've enjoyed what you've seen today, please note that JArts programming like JLive and others do not exist without generous community support from people like you. So I have put the donate link into the chat should you feel inclined to make a gift today. But Rachel, thank you. I wish you a happy Purim, which actually falls on St. Patrick's Day this year. So there's an extra layer. And here we are in our costumes. So we're bringing a little more light. Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Rachel. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right. Bye.